Right, we're joined this morning by Andrew Studdert Kennedy, Vicar at St.Andrew Church in Uxbridge. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning, Steve. Very nice to be in your studio again.
Now, you're a Queen's chaplain, and you've met the Queen a couple of times. Any feedback on how she was? I mean, most people say when they meet her, the feedback seems to be she put them at their ease. She was really interested in what they had to say or what they were up to. What was your sort of feedback on meeting the Queen?
Well, to be honest, my meetings with her were exceedingly fleeting. One at a gathering of Queen's chaplains at Windsor Castle, and then a few months later, or a few weeks later actually, at a garden party at Buckingham Palace. And I was presented to the Queen, as the formal title is called. And she was very professional. She appeared genuinely interested and delighted to meet me as I was to meet her. So I can echo all the positive things that people have said about her in that sense, certainly.
And what's your response to people's reaction to the Queen's death? She represents something, doesn't she, to the people in the UK? She
certainly does, and astonishingly about the worldwide response. I think in the UK itself, I think that it's the sheer longevity of her reign and her life that is so remarkable, and that she has been a constant for everybody. I think anybody whose own parents lived to a great age, who might have died recently in their 90s, whether it was a parent or a grandparent, will feel that in some way a connection which they had with that parent or grandparent has in some way been loosened untied, if you like, by the death of Her Majesty yesterday. It's as if there's a presence that's been constant in our lives, has lifted and gone, and we're not sure yet of what lies ahead. So it is a disorienting time. And I think people have been, from what I've seen on social media, people have surprised themselves by how emotional they have felt. It's an event that is simultaneously completely predicted and yet at the same time a great, great shock when it actually happens. And in that sense, it's like any other death.
And will you be doing events and things in the church or in the general area? And there's bells rung, aren't there, at certain points?
Indeed, yes. So today, both St. Andrew's Church beyond the Civic Centre and St. Margaret's here in the town centre will be open for the lighting of candles, if people would like to do that. There's a book of condolence for people to sign, and just the chance to sit in a quiet, sacred space and reflect. So that's for during the day, both churches today. And then our services on Sunday will clearly reflect and pay tribute to the passing of Her Majesty. And at some point, we don't yet know when, because it's dependent upon the date of the funeral itself, but at some point we will offer a civic service here in Uxbridge. But I should say that later today, at noon, the bells will be tolled at St. Andrew's Church. For, I think, 15 minutes, a bell will be tolled at midday.
So going back through her life, she was born in 1926, which seems extraordinarily long time ago. Astonishingly, a huge amount of things have happened in that time. Her coronation was on 1953, so she saw the war. It's an amazing kind of transition, almost pre-electricity, and the sort of changes that we've seen in our lives, in the way we run our lives as well. She's seen this huge, huge change, and yet kind of kept us all together in a way.
I agree. I think it is. I mean, you just think of what she has lived through. It is absolutely astonishing, or indeed any 96-year-old, what they have lived through is quite extraordinary. During that time, in some ways, Britain has changed beyond recognition, and yet in many ways there's a lot that's the same about the temperament, I think the sense of humour, and I think and a sense of perspective. And I think in no small part the Queen was responsible, has certainly played a huge part in that as a figure of complete continuity. I think the other thing that is really very extraordinary about the institution of the monarchy is how a monarch can be a figure of mystique and sort of remoteness in some ways, and yet also somebody with whom we can somehow identify and we feel a personal connection with because of the way she's been around throughout our lives. So there's that paradox of somebody who is both remote and yet near. And I think that's part of what's being played out in the public response at the moment.
And you're someone who's probably experienced people with grief. Any sort of tips for people, not to get over it, but I suppose to talk about it with friends and try and understand it?
I think all I would really say is that don't be embarrassed about it. Don't be ashamed about any feelings that you might have. And in some ways, if I may be allowed to use the phrase, make friends with these feelings. If you do feel very shocked or very upset and tearful, welcome into your emotions. Don't deny those feelings, because essentially I think what will be happening there is that you will be being told something about yourself which perhaps can reach you in no other way. We will be open in a way that you won't have been otherwise.
So we're welcoming in King Charles III. Can you explain a bit more technically about how that happens? I mean, obviously there'll be a period of mourning, and then I'm not actually sure how the whole system works.
My understanding, I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding is that, and it will be tomorrow, Saturday, that King Charles will return to London, and he will then be, I think it's the Accession Council, will meet in the Chapel Royal in St. James's Palace, not in Buckingham Palace. And the Accession Council, I think its members include everybody who's in the Privy Council, and they gather and I don't know whether the correct word is, but let's say elect or appoint the monarch, and then from a balcony at some part of St. James's Palace, the new monarch is declared as, in this case, the king. And that will happen, I think, on Saturday. And then technically on that day, my understanding is that actually flags can be flown at full mast, and then they would be lowered to half mast until the day of the funeral. The accession to the throne will take place tomorrow in St. James's Palace. The coronation, of course, will take place much, much later.
In the Queen's case, the coronation was almost a year later, wasn't it?
It was over a year later, because it was February the 6th was her accession, and the coronation was not until June of the following year, so it's 15 months, yeah.
Well, thanks, Andrew. And as you say, the churches in Uxbridge are open.
Indeed.
People who want to come in and light candles and sign books of condolences.
I'm very grateful to have the chance to talk with you. It's always a pleasure to come in here. And I think just all I really would say is that this is a moment in the life of our nation, and I think we should honour it in the sense of just slowing down. I suspect that's happening anyway, and just being aware that, yes, this is a moment of great transition, and at the same time, because it's something that is affecting all of us, it is an opportunity for it to become a moment not just of transition, but of unity. And I think that's perhaps the most important thing that can emerge from this.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you.